At this point, it's been about a year since I last worked on anything Pokémon related. Not that I suddenly stopped liking making Pokémon videos, it's just that all that I gained from it was, this. Instead of cluttering my channel with inactive Pokémon subscribers, I decided to shy away from the franchise to make whatever the hell I felt like instead. Which has been amazing, if I'm being brutally honest. However, in light of recent events, I've returned sooner than I could have ever imagined. Not only did making the Grand Theft Auto 3 retrospective spark the urge inside of me to make more retrospectives, but the existence of this video more so stems from the releases of Sword and Shield in 2019 and the more recent Generation 4 remakes, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, in 2021. These games were not received well by the core fanbase. Hell, if I have to believe everything I read on the interwebs, these games are the worst games known to mankind. It's not even close. Now, I too have played these games, and contrary to popular opinion, I don't think they're all that bad. To me, they just suffer from the same things every single entry in the past forever has suffered from. The slow animations, boring story, piss-easy battles, and most importantly, never bringing anything new to the table. Now, none of this has ever been a problem to me. These limitations were very much present when I got into Pokémon in the early 2000s, and after about 2 decades, I'm still playing the newly released games. Every time a new game comes out, I'm excited to explore the new areas, use some new funky looking creatures, and battle new opponents. With Pokémon, you just know what you're going to get beforehand, and that's exactly why I never really feel the intense hatred some of the fans do whenever I finish a new entry. I get exactly what I purchased it for, a reskinned idea that feels different than the last one. Which is perfectly fine. The games always satisfy my needs to a certain degree, and I rarely feel robbed of my money. However, this entire thought process made me realize how empty these games actually are. To me, there isn't a single reason to replay these games. You don't replay them for the story, since almost all of them are incoherent and uninteresting. You don't replay them for the worlds themselves, since there isn't unique or different movement through them like there is in platformers. You'd replay them for the core mechanic of Pokémon. Catching and raising Pokémon and fighting opponents in turn-based battles. But is that really a reason to replay the games when most of the fights go like...
Oh boy, I have finally arrived at the Elite Four. These Elite Guardians will surely push me to my limits and make me use every page of my strap Motherfucker!
If I really want to play Pokémon for the sake of competitive fights, why wouldn't I just hop on Showdown instead and battle actual human beings that understand the game's mechanics instead of this? To me, there just isn't any reason to replay these main series games, because the only thing that would draw me back in is readily available elsewhere, and much better in terms of quality as well. However, as I continued skimming through more of the BDSP backlash, I suddenly realized something. There actually is a main series styled game that does spark this urge inside of me to replay it from time to time. Pokémon Colosseum is still amongst my top 2 most enjoyable main series styled games of all time, with the other unsurprisingly being its sequel, Pokémon XD Gale of Darkness. Now, while these are officially labeled as spin-offs, they essentially follow the same core concepts of the main series games. Capturing and raising Pokémon and fighting enemies in these turn-based battles makes up for most of the game. But the difference between these two and any main series entry is that Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness manage to provide a unique and enjoyable experience that does in fact feel worth replaying. In order to figure out why these games bring about what the main series entries are unable to up until today, I hereby present you the first of 2 retrospectives, a deep dive into Pokémon Colosseum. This looks different than I remember. That's better. Pokémon Colosseum is the first 3D Pokémon game for the Nintendo GameCube, developed by Genius Sonority. Genius Sonority began operations in July 2001 for the original purpose of developing Pokémon games for home consoles, and they officially received funding from Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi by 2002. The funding they've got must have felt like chugging 10 Red Bulls, because on November 21st, 2003, just 365 days after the release of Ruby and Sapphire on the Game Boy Advance, Pokémon Colosseum hit the markets. To me, Pokémon Colosseum isn't just the first 3D Pokémon game on the GameCube, but also the first 3D Pokémon game in general. Sure, this wasn't the first time we saw 3D Pokémon models and such, but up until this point the only 3D Pokémon experience was limited to Pokémon Stadium 2, which debatably could be labeled a game mode rather than its own adventure. Colosseum brought a fresh, new adventure with a world to explore, story to follow, and a team to train and fight with. All brought to you in 3D. And a little over 18 years after release, I still think this adventure, with all of its dated flaws, is one of the best they've ever come up with. Pokémon Colosseum starts similar to any other Pokémon game. You start in your hometown and read dialogue after dialogue until you finally obtain your starter and are ready to take on the gym. Wait a minute, I'm blowing up a building? Pokémon Colosseum does things a lot differently than what we've become used to before and after its release. Before the events of Pokémon Colosseum, a criminal organization called Cypher teamed up with Team Snag'em to jointly rule the world through the use of beings called Shadow Pokémon. Pokémon designed to be nothing more than soulless fighting machines. In order to do so, Cypher supplied Team Snag'em with these devices called Snag Machines, which can be used to do the unthinkable: steal Pokémon from their trainers. In Pokémon Colosseum, you play as Wes, or mentally I'm still 7, okay. Wes is a member of a criminal organization called Team Snag'em, with a smile that is capable of seducing any human being. During the intro, he decides to explosively turn on his homies and steal a snag machine himself, to combat the evil force from achieving said world domination. Now, this save the world plot from the baddies isn't anything new in Pokémon. Not even at the time this thing released. But it's what Genius Sonority did with this idea that makes Colosseum's story such a massive step up compared to your regular Pokémon Ruby adventure. Genius Sonority legit knew how to be dark with this idea, while still keeping it kid-friendly simultaneously. Having Pokémon turn into soulless puppets by artificially closing the door to their heart and mass-producing them in a lab like the worthless beings they are, is such a refreshing idea for a franchise that rarely derives from the boring narrative. Aside from Sun and Moon, where they literally decided to freeze Pokémon alive for the sake of cryogenic preservation. That shit was dark and fucking sick at that, especially that one cutscene. You know the one. Now look, I'm not saying the usual storylines are bad or anything. I think Black and White really nailed the storyline around Team Plasma, and I can even appreciate what they tried with the whole Darkest Day idea in Sword and Shield. But none of these games feel as story focused and mature as this game. Wes being a former gang member with a criminal record, girls playfully flirting with him, the much more sinister characters like NASCAR, the more serious overtones in the dialogue, story and visuals just really leave a certain impression on the player the other games are unable to do. Everyone and everything you do and see is tied to the overlapping storyline in a very un-Pokemon-like way. There's just something about fighting the street thugs in the criminal pirate town and visiting the criminal Cypher underground that just hits different, you know. Genius Sonority tried to tell a story about a grim world full of criminals that's impacting everyone and everything. And they succeeded in providing an adventure that aged like fine wine. That being said, the story tends to be very rough around the edges. While the overall concept is great, it seems like Genius Sonority had trouble figuring out how to transition the story from one area to another. As a kid, I never really noticed how random these really were, but now that I've got an extra 18 years of playing games under my belt, yikes. To illustrate what I mean by this, let me take you to Pyrite Town, home of the street thugs. At some point, this kid called Silva is being held hostage in this Pyrite Tower. You beat the Cypher peons and Myra B randomly invites you into his Batcave that is there for no apparent reason. You beat Myra B and then Rui comes up with some story about visiting her grandpa so you can unlock a gate village. Then you speak to her grandpa and some random dude runs in yelling that Cypher randomly came to visit the Relic Stone. You beat the Cypher peon at the Relic Stone, talk to some senile old man, talk to grandpa, and then this dude called Duking informs you via email that Cypher is now attacking Mount Battle for no reason. The entire game is just, oh, story event is over. Now, look guys, they are here now for a reason that will be explained later. And then you beat a boss and repeat. Now, don't get me wrong, for Pokemon standards this ain't anything unusual, but I would have loved smoother transitions, a reason to proceed to the next story event. What I do disagree on, however, is the complaint at the time that the means to proceed are unclear at times. If you are capable of using your goddamn eyes, you can read the character's dialogue that hint at what to do next, and even if the characters don't give a clue in said dialogue, something blatantly obvious will have changed. The gigantic Colosseum area appearing before the Pyrite wheel is stolen, this lady suddenly standing in front of her shop after you triggered a certain story event. All you need to do is pay the slightest bit of attention and you won't get lost. It really ain't much worse than your regular adventure, where I got lost finding a Sylph Scope for 20 hours as a kid. I mean, I still prefer the hints inside of i.e. a menu like in Sword and Shield to ape my dumbass, but people really talk about it like this was some massive issue in just this game. Like, get a fucking grip, dude. While the transitions in the storyline might feel a little unfinished, the characters acting out the storyline most certainly don't. Up until this day, Pokémon Colosseum has brought about some of the most memorable characters in the entire franchise. The badass anti-hero protagonist rather than being a random kid, a Final Fantasy-esque super baddie, a wannabe pop idol obsessed with being famous, Hell, even the rebel kids in the underground Cypher City are memorable characters. But the absolute highlight of this game, and quite possibly the entire franchise, is Myra B himself. God, this character is so damn good. Every time you interfere with his plans or straight up beat him or his minions, he's just like, "You're so not fabulous, and for that reason, I'm out." And then you beat all of his allies in his Batcave, finally reach his boss room, and... Every single thing about this character is just fucking legendary. From the 70s look, to the dialogue, to the iconic background music. He's just such an uncharacteristic Pokémon character, which makes him stand out as much as he does. Rather than fulfilling his Cypher duties, he just spoils his goofy boys and wants to teach them how to dance. And as a result of that attitude, he gets relegated to using a Shadow Sudowoodo, where every other admin gets a legendary dog. And he still couldn't care less. He's just enjoying life. Man, we should all channel our inner Myra B sometimes. Don't let Myra B's outstanding character understate how memorable the other characters are though. Hell, even the random NPCs have some personality to them. Everybody that has ever touched this game knows who Rider Willy and Pokémon trainer Kyle are. Kyle? Whatever. These characters have fuck all to do with the story, and yet they will still leave an impression on you. And the same really goes for the mute protagonist Wes. Bro doesn't say a single word throughout the entire game, but just the badass intro, his backstory and his appearance are more than enough to, in my opinion, make him the best protagonist a Pokémon game has ever seen. And Wes doesn't just leave an impression as a person, but also with the Pokémon he uses. After escaping the Snag'em hideout with the snack machine, you spend a few minutes at the outskirts stand, after which Rider Willy wants to battle you for the sake of an introductory battle. Man, I remember the first time I saw Wes send out his Pokémon so vividly. I was so damn surprised to see Wes send out a high level Umbreon and Espion. Obtaining these Pokémon as a kid was quite literally impossible in any of the other games. As an 8-year-old without the internet, I didn't understand the friendship mechanic. They felt incredibly unobtainable to me. To then see the yin and the yang of the Eevee family come out was a dream come true. Such a damn cool choice from the folks over at Genius Sonority to have these as predetermined starters. And at such a high level too. And just this detail is what makes this the easiest and most fun game to revisit in the entire franchise. What I mean by this is that this is pretty much the only game that identifies what parts of the usual adventure are boring and just straight up eliminates them. No stupid ass tutorials, no raising Pokémon against a bunch of brain dead AIs, no fights against gym leaders that go like, "This is it. This is my last stand. I'm going to give it my all." By starting the game with 2 Pokémon at or above level 25, you eliminated the most boring part of the game, where nobody is even able to touch you if they wanted to. Sure, this might hinder the experience for someone that has never played Pokémon before and wants to get into it, but who the fuck picks up Pokémon Colosseum as their first game anyway? You're just straight thrown into the entertaining part of the game that usually takes hours to get to. And they haven't just done this with the battles themselves, but also with the pathway to the important boss battles. Traveling from city to city isn't done by making your way through hordes of trainers and routes until you obtain HM Fly, but you're just shown a cutscene of Wes and Rui driving a vehicle that can't be good for your carbon footprint. Every battle is part of the story in one way or another, and there is no real filler content. Although a case can be made for the Colosseum battles and the Pyrite Town Street Dog battles. By eliminating the tutorial part of the game and removing any tedious mandatory filler content, you're just left with the content you play Pokémon for. Sure, the adventure is a little shorter as a result, but I'll take 12 hours of pure fun over 20 to 25 hours of inconsistent fun all day. Why Game Freak has never tried this formula themselves afterwards is a mystery to me. A bigger mystery, however, is how well these graphics hold up after 18 years. The entire look of this game is just so not plastic. Just the textures, the color palette, the lighting in the different areas, it all looks just right. Whether it's the small little details in the Cypher Lab, the zen feeling in a gate village, or the criminal atmosphere in the Cypher Underground, I just think these are some of the most appealing visuals the franchise has ever seen. As dated as they might be. And this doesn't just apply to the overworld itself. I feel this exact same way about the battles. When you decide to participate in the Colosseum challenge, you have this cool little drone intro, after which you battle in a very Colosseum-like environment. When you battle Myra B in his cave, you have this cool little cave background with fences, mineshafts and all that jazz. And even the basic stadium battles versus NASCAR and Evice at the end leave more of an impression on me than the Dynamax areas in Sword and Shield. And let's not forget about the battle animations either, which are some of the most alive battle animations till date. For every attack, every Pokémon has a unique animation, and when they get hit and or faint, they have a unique damage animation as well, which honestly looks so damn good. And their little dancing in between turns or when you're picking a move or some shit, it just makes them feel so much more alive. Like, you want to own a Ludicolo when you see him vibing like this. And yeah, I'm very aware the visuals have a bunch of shortcomings. They straight up use desaturated Pokémon models from Stadium 2 that are clearly outshined by the newly created Generation 3 Pokémon. Which, yeah, was rather unnecessary. Then there's the fact that the cool ass battle animations come with the downside of having turns take a fucking eternity at times. With me being the Pokémon master that I am, I utilized Umbreon as a staller, using Confuse Ray and Toxic on two Rain Dancing Reindeers Ludicolos made for some of the longest turns in the entire game, with a possible 10 animations having to follow each other up in a single turn. I personally think the immersive feeling is worth the trade-off, but not being able to disable the battle animations might understandably be a deal breaker to some, since the animations are even longer than the normal Pokémon games, aside from like Sword and Shield perhaps. That Dynamax shit really be taking way too fucking long, bro. And then there's of course the obvious shortcoming. The graphics are very dated. But what do you expect from a game made with 2003 technology? As I'm scripting this section of the video, it's actually the release date of Pokémon Legends Arceus. While the game is actually a fucking blast to play, I think the 2003 adventure just looks more appealing. Of course, Legends Arceus looks better in terms of details, animations, visual effects, etc, etc. But if you'd hold a gun to my head and ask me if I prefer this, or this, or this, Man, why man, why does Bidoof look like a PNG, bro, for real? I just think the less plastic and stiff look is my pick. Not to say that I dislike Legends Arceus or even Sword and Shield's look for that matter. In fact, I like the way they look, but my overly subjective opinion is that these visuals should have been expanded upon. These should have been the future of 3D Pokémon, rather than being left in a dark corner, collecting more and more dust after the eventual release of XD Gale of Darkness. Collecting dust is the best bridge I could think of when wanting to insert the following intermission. I hate that I have to smear my video with this brief message from my sponsors, aka myself, but the past has taught me that this is sadly necessary. As you can see on your screen right now, it tend to be my Pokemon videos that get recommended and do very well, while the others don't even get close. As a result of this, I have garnered around 2,640 Pokemon subscribers that are now largely inactive because their main interest wasn't me as a YouTube guy, but the Pokemon video I happened to make. So hereby, I want to ask you, the potential new viewer, to only subscribe if you're interested in my other stuff. I cover unknown indie games, new and old AAA games, and recently I've been doing retrospectives like these from time to time, but I'm not, and will never be, a PokeTuber. If you like the kind of stuff I do, then sure, hit that subscribe button. But be sure to unsubscribe as soon as you're having doubts about enjoying my other shit. If you're only interested in Pokemon, then please just enjoy this video. Leave a like if it was worth it to you and move on with your day. Once again, I hate that I have to do this, but the inactive Pokemon subscribers are the sole reason why I initially stopped covering anything Pokemon related. An inactive sub is absolutely fucking worthless to me. Either way, this video has been overshadowed long enough. Let's get back to the Shadow Pokemon. The whole concept of Pokémon Colosseum is a whole new take on an already existing mechanic, catching and raising Pokémon. And not just catching them, but catching them by stealing them from their previous owner, which no other game ever allowed you to. The snag machine makes this feature only available for opposing Shadow Pokémon, but contrary to a bunch of dumbasses on the internet, I think this actually makes a lot of sense. The Shadow Pokémon are simply machines that don't have a strong enough bond with their trainers to prevent them from being snagged, like, you know, their normal Pokémon do. To then raise these corrupted Pokémon and piece by piece open up their heart in order to purify them, having them enter hyper mode and disobeying your orders in the process, is just such a cool idea to me. But with every cool idea comes a bunch of criticism from the unsatisfiable Pokémon fanbase. Back in 03 and even today, the main criticism of this game is this exact mechanic. Because you can only steal Shadow Pokémon from the trainers, this means the amount of obtainable Pokémon is rather limited. You cannot steal anybody's normal Pokémon, and it goes without saying, there aren't any wild encounters anywhere. Now, while this was reason enough for the crybabies to voice their dissatisfaction, the Shadow Pokémon selection is far from optimal. From subpar Pokémon like Mantine and Noctowl, to single evolution Pokémon like Gligar and Sudowoodo, the available group isn't the best of the best. And oh, this really made the haters feel like they had a solid argument.
Ugh, but my freedom, why Batmons only, guys? Worst game ever.
They really be hating on my boy Sudowoodo. Can you believe that shit?
Sudowoodo said.
To those that have said anything along those lines or still share that opinion, with all due respect, shut the fuck up. Every single Pokemon game you can catch whatever Pokemon you desire, in grass, caves, water, etc, etc. And one time they decide to change things up, one time they decide to derive from the narrative, and you decide to be a crybaby bitch about it. Like, what you gonna do with any sort of freedom? Don't act like you didn't beat Pokemon Ruby by using your starter Pokemon, catching a Tailo or a Ralts at the start, and then catching a legendary at the end to farm the Elite Four for the 30th time. For once, the developers essentially pick what options you got, and they make you use Pokemon you'd otherwise barely even know existed. I personally came to appreciate Pokemon like the long-necked elephant and the big-mouth pitbull for what they can bring to the table, even against the toughest opponents. And otherwise, I would have never even bothered to catch any of them due to having far superior options available. After this, you got your diamonds and pearls, your black and whites, your X and Ys, where they give you that freedom you won't utilize anyway. So why can't this game use a unique idea that limits the Pokemon you can use, and thus changes your gameplay indefinitely? The limited available options isn't a flaw, nor a handicap. It's a cool ass feature that makes you appreciate otherwise overshadowed Pokemon, which is really fucking cool to me. Now, for this video, I've done some research on the game to not look like a complete idiot. And an additional complaint to the limited available Pokemon in retrospectives on this game is the fact that their moves are limited as well. While this is in fact an easy argument to make in a retrospective after 5 more generations, it's even dumber to me than the limited available Pokemon argument. Like, hear me out right. I saw this one dude argue that Umbreon was useless, because it didn't have moves like Dark Pulse available in this generation, and thus it was stuck with Bite. Aside from the fact that Umbreon is meant to be utilized as a defensive interrupter, stuff like that is just laughable to me. I mean, yeah, there wasn't a physical special split. Yeah, today's Pokemon have a much bigger move pool available than back then, but it's criminal to use this as an argument against Pokemon Colosseum. I mean, yeah, sure. The fact that I was forced to use a Surf and Blizzard for Alligator due to these limitations at the time hasn't particularly aged well when you can see what this Pokemon can do nowadays. Sure, it's a fact that you can craft much better teams now than in Pokemon Colosseum. But using this as a way to shit on this game, saying it aged poorly, it just doesn't sit well with me. The Pokemon aren't optimal in hindsight, but are more than enough to put up a solid fight against any opponent. Yeah, I had Bite on my Umbreon until the very end. Yeah, Espion's best move was Psybeam at the end. Yeah, my Altaria had fucking Dragon Breath when I beat the game. But none of these supposed limitations bothered me until I did some research for this video. The limitations are just there in hindsight and don't hinder the experience whatsoever. The moves you get are mostly the moves you need anyway. I mean, I'm all for looking at an old game through modern glasses, but bitching about something like a smaller move pool when the entire game, including AI opponents, operates under those same limitations is just... bleh. Bleh. I licked my microphone. And all of this resulted in the complaint that this game is too difficult. No. No, it's not. Pokemon Colosseum is significantly more difficult than most of the main series Pokemon games. The enemy Pokemon, especially the Cypher admin ones, tend to be stronger than yours in terms of base stats. They pretty much always outlevel your squad, They got competitive movesets, including HMs, that usually fit their higher attack or special attack stat, and they are able to identify which Pokémon to hit by detecting a super effective weakness or simply hitting the Pokémon with the weakest defense of the two on your side of the field. The game is unfair, but it most certainly isn't too difficult. In order to figure out how hard this game really is, I decided to challenge myself a bit for the playthrough for this video. I allowed myself to only use a single ball on a shadow Pokémon before being forced to kill it, and other than that I just used some simple Nuzlocke rules where I couldn't use any healing stuff in battles and a death was permanent. Without any grinding and being underleveled for the entire playthrough, I lost a total of 9 Pokémon by the time I sent Evice's ass back home, and 3 of them were lost against Evice himself. Now, okay, let's take this into mind. I know quite a bit about competitive Pokémon because of playing a bunch of Showdown and following the professional VGC circuit. But I wouldn't claim to be a doubles expert at all. And yet, the opposition was barely able to tickle me. The game isn't too difficult. It's fun and challenging, and there are various ways to weaponize yourself against the opposition. For instance, the Pokémon you steal usually have super useful items, like a Twisted Spoon or a Quick Claw to aid you in battle. Then there's the Cypher Underground shop that's selling various TMs like Blizzard and Hyper Beam, but more importantly, Protect. Get yourself Protect if you want to make double battles infinitely easier. For real. And of course, there's also the very predictable AI that doesn't take very long to figure out. With them identifying a super effective weakness or the Pokémon with the lower defense stats, their moves are rather easy to predict and work around by i.e. switching or wasting their moves with a Protect. Like I said, I was underleveled all game and working with some half-assed Nuzlocke rules where I didn't allow myself to heal in battle. And this made for some of the most fun battles in the existence of Pokémon games. The continuous switch protect dynamic between my Pokémon and the enemy AI made me think about every move and plan ahead accordingly. Things such as baiting Ein into thundering my Gligar repeatedly in the different Pokémon slots, or rendering Evice's overleveled Slacking useless by repeatedly protecting on his non-truant turns, were incredibly satisfying gaming experiences. I'll tell you that much. For someone that's looking to get into the franchise, I'll admit, the game is too hard. But once again, if this is the first game you pick up in the entire franchise, that is most certainly a you problem. If you're familiar with basic Pokémon mechanics and don't desire Dark Pulse on an Umbreon to make it useful, this game isn't too difficult, nor do you need to grind more than the bare minimum. It's nothing more than a fucking blast. Pokémon Colosseum was great in 2003, and Pokémon Colosseum remains great in 2022, as dated as some of its aspects may be. Where the newer games were created with bigger development teams, better technology and more fleshed out mechanics, Colosseum still takes the cake when it comes to the overall experience. Games like Black and White are on par with Colosseum's story and characters, but lack in difficulty and have visual limitations due to being on the handhelds. Then there's games like Sun and Moon that do meet Colosseum's story, characters and somewhat feel challenging at times, but never feel challenging enough. And then there's games like Sword and Shield that were released on what could be considered a home console and just don't meet any of Colosseum's features in the slightest. Colosseum is a game that's limited by the era in which it was released, but it still manages to provide the most complete experience out of all the main series style Pokémon games. The very interesting but rough story, a whole new mechanic in snagging rather than catching wild ones, the grim but amazing looking worlds, characters, Pokémon, and animations, and most importantly, a challenging adventure. I just adore everything this game wanted to do, as dated as some of it might be. I even feel like there's an argument to be made for this having the best OST in the franchise. Although I personally give the crown to the beautiful Explorers of Sky soundtrack and even slightly prefer XD's OST as well. But hot damn, the tunes in Colosseum are good. When you're walking through Pyrite Town, this gangster-ass tune starts playing to complement the street thug atmosphere. And then the saxophone comes in. And then there's also the Criminal Cipher Underground with the eerie and tense OST that makes me feel like I'm in some sort of an action movie. And even when you're just wanting to calm down a bit, there's always the incredibly zen tune of the equally zen Agate Village. I really don't think a game OST like this is able to age in any way, shape or form, but if you're of the opinion it does, then this soundtrack aged incredibly well. Not a single miss detected. Pokémon Colosseum is a dated game. Dated when it comes to the graphics. Dated when it comes to the available Pokémon. Dated when it comes to the available movesets and physical special split. But after playing through it for the 20th time and thinking of and writing the script, I can only conclude the following. Pokémon Colosseum still remains untouched by any of the main series games when it comes to providing the most enjoyable experience. The newer games were made with better technology, more balanced movesets, a much bigger amount of Pokémon, and yet, to a certain extent, they failed to provide what Colosseum did so well. Something unique and memorable. I don't hate the main games. In fact, I think they're quite fun, and I keep buying the new games they release because I never end up disliking them. But even if I'm content with what I'm getting, I can't help but dream about a follow-up that expands on what this game was able to bring to the table. One can only dream, I guess.